It's a song called "O Verona," the reprise from the movie Romeo and Juliet. Perhaps a bit over the top, maybe a little pretentious, but I'm willing to risk it. My name is Jason, and this is Hexes and Soldiers, episode 25, the Diamond anniversary, so to speak, episode. It's 25 is the diamond that corresponds to the number, and I just realized I refer to myself as Jason, but on my channel I have AJ Toynbee. Now, why is that? Either I should be referring to myself as AJ Toynbee, or AJ Toynbee should in fact say Jason. Either way, um, shout outs in honor of Armed Forces Day and Memorial Day. I'd like to give a shout out to anyone and everyone who is in or has served in the military, and also ask that we not forget those veterans who have fallen. Let's keep them in our memory and not forget them. And for all you Canadians celebrating the Queen's birthday, whatever that might entail, don't get too rowdy up there. So, hello. I'll welcome you. I'll welcome you as well as myself back to this 25th episode. And as to what that means, well, unfortunately, not a whole heck of a lot. I was unable to land any interviews, and well, I guess in the end, this will just have to be another meat and potatoes episode, and hopefully that's okay with all of you. Not that I wouldn't love to do an interview with somebody at this point, perhaps nearly anybody, but the closest I think I've ever come is with Chris from NWS. Talked to him a couple times on the phone, very enjoyable to speak to. But for whatever reason, and I've gone into it in the past, he was just unwilling to have his views and opinions laid out there for everybody to hear. So I have to respect that. And yeah, I had a week off, which was enjoyable, and I got some valuable do nothing time in, and that means a lot to me. I don't know if it means a lot to you guys, but to be able to do not a damn thing is very valuable to me, and I got to do that. So I even managed to sneak in a little bit of play testing as well, which I'll get to in a little bit. But yeah, I was able to hang out in the historic French Quarter, which is really just a stone's throw away from where we live. I mean, we could go down there at any point. We just never do. I'm not sure why. I guess busyness takes care of that. But got to go down there, suck down drinks, wolf down eats, while lazing in the sun, poolside, and taking advantage of the free hotel amenities, namely in the form of mimosas. And I'm not an alcoholic. I drink very rarely. But I think this would be my gateway drink. There's gateway drugs, and you take that, and they say it opens up the door to bigger and badder things. I think if I was to be a broke, stumbling, staggering alcoholic, it would begin with mimosas, and I guess I'm glad I'm not. So anyway, of course, the weather here hasn't actually been as bad as it could be, which is good. But of course, it's coming. I can already feel that bubble of sweat-inducing heat and humidity coming my way, and of course, I'm just dreading it. What do you do, though? I chose to live here. That's what I get. So the week off was nice, and the post office has been running me ragged, par usual. But again, the pay is good, so I'll just soldier on. And anyhow, playtesting for Shenandoah Studios at Gettysburg, The Tide Turns, has been interesting to say the least. And I don't know if many or if any of you have been checking out my blog, which is, I'll just plug it here again, hexesandsoldiers.blogspot.com. If you didn't know, now you do. But I posted a couple things regarding the rules and gameplay, and overall, I have to say I like it. And I, of course, stated that in the past, that the American Civil War is not my strong suit by any means, but an overall interest has lingered long enough for me to turn my head's direction more than once. And as this is my first time playtesting, I have to keep reminding myself to playtest and not suggest. And it's very tempting to do so, and of course, they are the suggesters, not me, as it is their game, and I'm merely testing what they suggest. So that said, I've devoted the majority of my time to a small three-turn scenario entitled Pickett's Charge, and For those of you who aren't familiar with this, Pickett's charge was an infantry assault ordered by General Lee against General Meade's Union positions on Cemetery Ridge on the 3rd of July in 1863, and as such, shouldn't it be called Lee's charge? But anyway, the last day of the Battle of Gettysburg, its futility was predicted by the charge's commander, Longstreet. Okay, maybe it should be called Longstreet's charge. Okay, I'll stop. And it was arguably an avoidable mistake from which the Southern War effort never fully recovered psychologically. So, though it was ordered by Lee, the charge is named after a Major General George Pickett, who was one of three Confederate generals to lead the assault under Longstreet. And after Confederate attacks on both Union flanks had failed the day and night before, Lee was determined to strike the Union center on the third day. So on the night of July the 2nd, you have General Meade correctly predicting at a council of war that Lee's going to try and attack on his lines in the center the following morning. And the infantry assault was preceded by a massive artillery bombardment that was meant to soften up the Union defense and silence its artillery, but was largely ineffective. And approximately 12,500 men and 9 infantry brigades advanced over open fields for 3/4 of a mile under heavy Union artillery and rifle fire. And although some Confederates were able to actually breach the low stone wall that shielded many of the Union defenders, they just couldn't maintain their hold and were repulsed with over 50% casualties and a decisive defeat that ended the 3-day battle and Lee's campaign into Pennsylvania. Years later, when asked why his charge at Gettysburg failed, General Pickett replied, "I've always thought the Yankees had something to do with it." That's very interesting. So I'm playing this thing, and I'm digging it for the most part. It's chit pull, which I like, with tons of units already starting the scenario unable to move throughout the entire thing, and tons of units having already suffered step losses and demoralizations, so very few, if any, units are fresh, and that makes for some pretty bloody combat results. But yeah, the more the details and particulars I've already blogged, so I won't repeat here. And if you care to read them, I've already stated where you can go to read it. But movement, again, not a lot of movement because, as I said, a lot of these guys can't move. But as far as zones of control go, once you enter an enemy zone of control, you're stuck. So you got sticky zones of control. And anybody that is an enemy unit within your zone of control, you have to attack. It's not optional. So when the time comes, you'll be fighting. Combat, like I said, must attack. You have approach fire, which is kind of interesting. So when you do move into an enemy zone of control, the enemy gets a chance to do, I guess, what you would call defensive fire. And you don't really get to respond, but the units to survive, well, you go on to do a normal combat round. So, in a nutshell, historically speaking, all I really learned I already knew. The charge was as useless in the game as it was in real life, and I honestly can't see, although it has been demonstrated to the opposite result, I just don't see how the Confederates can even win this scenario. But a couple of people have allowed them to do so. I'm not exactly sure how. So other than that, what's new? Well, the industry seems to undergo fits and starts with numerous intervening periods of catatonia, and it appears that once again we are amidst the latter. And I guess the industry is only as idiosyncratic as its designers and developers, so what do we expect, right? One thing I'd mentioned recently was an interest in Death Ride Kursk Totenkopf, a game from Grognard Simulations, and I think I'll be holding off, and that's because when it comes to the 16 maps that this thing has, the artwork of which I'm fairly disappointed in, they don't even match up. And this thing's not cheap, so for your money, I mean, it seems that's the least they could do. I don't know exactly who to point the finger of blame at specifically, but somebody is at fault here. And like I said, for the money, and you can't even get the maps to match up. I'm sorry, that's extremely disheartening. And yeah, I don't want a bunch of maps that don't align. So I'm still curious about the system, and I'd love to crack it open, but I think I'm going to wait a bit longer. And might even grab something that preceded this release, though the specific subject matter interests me to the utmost. Another thing, and trust me, this is minor, but I'm OCD with a lot of stuff, and I had read that the counters are camouflage, and I was worried about it, and it seems justifiably so. I like the idea, but as far as actually doing it, I don't know how you could pull this off and make it look good, and yeah, I guess they kind of failed here too. Again, I like the idea, but as far as pulling it off, I don't know how you could do it, and I don't see that they succeeded. But I guess I just like my counters basic, minimal, and functional. So what can I say? What else? I was finally able to land a copy of SPI's Army Group South. So yay me. And I've had trouble finding this thing. Expensive copies available on Board Game Geek. An expensive copy available from Mr. Sharp, and expensive screwed up copies available from Noble Knight. They had a copy with no box and another copy with annotated rules. And it finally hit me one day. I'm going to call these guys and see if I can't get the rules from the no box version and the box from the annotated rules version, combine it, and have a decent and complete game. Well, the guy, I forget his name, but he was nice enough. He said he'd check it out. And in fact, he did that. And I had just pulled the trigger on the coming storm, so my wargaming piggy bank was busted and empty. So I told him I'd appreciated what he did, and I would contact him as soon as I had some more disposable income. Meanwhile, I'm checking eBay, and this thing hasn't been on there since the $30 copy that I failed to bid on went away, and noticed not one but two copies now are up for auction. One punched, one unpunched, and of course, as I hate to wait for anything, I'm already gunning for the punched copy as I can get that 2 days earlier because the auction ends sooner than the unpunched copy. So I'm at work delivering the mail, and in between houses, I'm on my phone bidding on this thing, and well, I won. So got it for about $50, which I'm not ashamed of. Meanwhile, the unpunched copy has yet to end. As far as the auction goes, now things are already going for more than double what I paid for the punched copy, so I think I got a hell of a deal. And yeah, so sorry, Noble Knight. I appreciate what you guys were willing to do for me, but when it comes to price, in the end, cheaper always gets my dollar. So um, that's that. And then what else? Oh, I do have a tad bit of news. I just remembered. Regarding the ASL Journal, I did kind of a complete ASL update. I believe it was last episode, but nothing on the ASL Journal. Well, ASL Journal 11, they say, they've narrowed it down. You ready? It'll be released within the next 12 months. I mean, what? Why even bother mentioning anything? The next 12 months. Okay, I'll be sure to mark my calendar. One big black mark through the whole thing, I guess. No, bless their hearts. Well, what else? I ordered my first set of official dice, which sounds odd, and it is. It's very odd. Why would I do such a thing? Well, most of my stock, if you will, is back in St. Louis. And as I've been playtesting this Gettysburg game, it uses a ton of 10-sided dice. And I've been stuck using a hodgepodge of multi-sized, different colored dice, and it's been driving me nuts. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to check out some dice. So I found, ChessX. I guess, what is that, a trusted name in dice? I mean, I don't know. Is one die as good as another? I'm the wrong guy to ask or pontificate on that. But I ordered from ChessX. Got myself some normal looking, just blue 10-sided dice, all the same size, white numerals, and they should work just fine. And I also noticed these things are made in Denmark. So maybe that'll add a little extra magic to the dice. Maybe some like Viking rune like magic. And of course, the game store here. Don't even get me started on that. This so called game store, bless them, they're trying, but really they carry the bare essentials to stay open and still call themselves a store. It just baffles me. I go in there every now and again hoping, crossing my fingers, that they will have just one copy of something new, anything, preferably a war game, but I'll settle for anything at this point. Nothing. Same old stuff. The dust, you can run your finger over the dust that is accumulating on the stock they have. And every once in a while, I see a number of people in there. It's the magic cards, it's the Pathfinder stuff. I just, good for them, but my lord. Yeah, so they have dice. Getting back to what I was talking about. And I'm looking at these things, and it all looks like, I don't know, something you would play with in a Dungeons and Dragons setting. They all look like the dice are on fire or a dragon puked on them or something. And I'm, not to sound too choosy or picky, but I just can't take what I'm doing seriously if I'm playing with dice that look like eyes that have been plucked from elves or something. So no go there. So I had to pull the trigger and order some dice. Did so. Came through. Got them. Happy with them. End of story. And then as far as top 10, you know, I what is happening to this show? I guess you could ask. It's falling apart. I started a top 10. I didn't finish it. No top 10. So I'll try and comprise something for you guys next time. And I want to keep these things somewhat interesting. I'm not going to do a top 10 just to do a top 10. So I'll do it when I have something interesting to relate. And I guess that corresponds to my character, if you will. Whereas my girlfriend will talk to hear herself talk. I generally only talk to say something, if that makes any sense. So let's apply that to the top 10. I apologize. Make it up to you guys. I promise. So at this point, I'm going to ask you to leave the sitting room and enter the situation room with me. And let me begin by saying, as I'm not free to suggest to the heads at Shenandoah Studio regarding their fine game, soon to be released, Gettysburg the Tide Turns, I am free to suggest to you guys things. And one thing in particular I noticed right away, you can't miss it, is the almost, and I don't even know if I should preface this with almost, I should just flat out say complete lack of command and control. Um, really, you as the player comprise the command and control. There are no headquarters, no leaders other than in name. Other than that, they serve no purpose. No nothing. And I don't understand why they would want to do it this way other than to keep things simple. But then again, you could argue there are a number of ways to incorporate command and control and yet keep things simple. I don't understand. I can't assume that stuff's going to come later. I mean, they're far into development, but I could be wrong. And again, they don't want feedback regarding why don't you have command and control. They want to know uh, is the step losses too few, too many? How does combat play out? Think mechanical specifics like that. That's what they're interested in. They don't want broad sweeping ideas and suggestions. They don't care, so I'm not going to suggest it. But it does bother me, and I can't myself. If this was my game, I couldn't imagine releasing something that left that subject unattended. So, with that gripe, I thought I'd segue into command and control in general, and then focus on a few games in particular by way of example. So, let me start by saying I stumbled upon the site, and I don't know if any of you have heard of this. I never had. Uh, it's called Hisentco, Hisentco, which stands for Historic Enterprises Company, Hisentco. And apparently these guys, well, not apparently, they do design and publish wargame rules. And again, had never heard of these guys before. And in particular, I found an article on the site, and there's a number of articles, but I don't know why. I felt compelled to read this, and I'm glad I did. But it was entitled "Do Wargamers Have a Control Problem?" which was a very good read. And in the past, I had stated I wanted to do something on command and control, and I thought, well, maybe I'll afford myself the opportunity here. I'm not sure how well this will be received, but this is my attempt to do so. So, the article itself began, and I'll read a couple paragraphs because I thought it was somewhat brilliant the way he relates this. And it starts: I lined up my men in careful order, placing my best guys on my right. Across the field, my opponent formed his forces in a single line to try and stop my onslaught. I planned to launch a crushing assault, followed by a deep penetration beyond his front line. It was sure to work. When both sides were ready, I flipped the switch and the action began. Several men on my team made straight for the sidelines. One ran backwards into our end zone, and two spun in circles. The ball carrier, well, you get the picture. Vibromatic football. I had this game growing up. That's the end of the article. Me speaking now. I had this game growing up, and I thought this was a brilliant analogy. Like him, for me, it represented one end of a wide spectrum when it comes to command and control. And God, that thing it was loud. I don't even know how this was decided to be sold as a toy. You plug it in, it's electric. I don't know how safe it was if you spilled something on it. Um, I don't think the game itself would be the only thing vibrating if that occurred. But yeah, you set these guys up, and as fun as it was frustrating as hell. Because, like he says, you could set them up in a certain way, but no matter how you set them up, there's no guarantee that from that point forward they would do what you want. And 9 times out of 10, they wouldn't. Yeah, go off to the side, spin in circles. Again, this was a different era, but these things were popular. I had one, and I played it, and oh my God, this stuff would be laughed at now. So here you have something similar, I guess, to the whole watchmaker philosophy or analogy, where God set things in motion and just sits back. And that happens. There's games, especially in the early days, but there's that is again on one end of the spectrum. A player sets up the initial parameters and then just sits back while the gears and levers perform their duty. As the game plays out. Beyond that, a player has no say in the matter. And you can contrast this with as the writer of this article does, with the opposite end of the spectrum, which I guess you could call chess. And of course, in chess, you have complete control over every one of your pieces, as well as full knowledge of the field of battle and your opponent's pieces, what he has, what their capabilities are. So the sweet spot is somewhere in the middle, and oftentimes gets missed in the plethora of game designs that are out there. So the problem of command and control gets further complicated in the everlasting search for realism. Now, don't get me wrong, I can dig realism as much as the next guy, but some people take it way too far. How many times have we heard, or have I heard, this game doesn't realistically simulate this, or this game doesn't realistically simulate that, or you know what I'm saying? So, how often do the people that say this actually listen to what they're saying? When you say this game and realism in the same sentence, you need to stop right there, because a game isn't real. It's a game. Okay? So don't they get it? It's a game by definition. So it can't be real. Here again, command and control rises to the forefront of the argument with laments of either too much control or not enough, while no one ever seems to be content. And that brings me back to the ASL thread that was on Board Game Geek. And this guy was disappointed in ASL and didn't want to play it anymore because he didn't feel it accurately portrayed or represented realism as far as the simulation goes, in a nutshell. But if you want to read this thing, not just to hear two sides argue about whether ASL is a realistic simulation or not, but to cover an overall argument regarding command and control, which is what this show is leaning on. 17 pages of this stuff, and there's some junk in it, but there's also some worthwhile stuff regarding command and control, and specifically within the infantry squad level. And yeah, so I would recommend you guys check that out. It's called "Leaving the Cult of ASL?" question mark, and it's in the War Games forums. Again, 17 pages of this stuff. Don't feel like you have to chime in on anything, and again, also don't feel like you have to read everything that was submitted, but skim through it. And there's some interesting topics, like I said, regarding command and control. And I think as an alternative to ASL, the gamer's tactical combat system gets brought up as a more accurate simulation of how squads work in World War II. But that's open to interpretation and argument, as 17 pages of this stuff attest to. But it's interesting stuff, and I got a kick out of reading it myself. So to get back to the matter at hand, another issue you have lies in historic time periods. I don't know if this is necessarily an issue, but per se, but the level and prevalence of command and control within, say, Napoleonic era, with writing out orders, command chains, etc., compared to, say, a World War II era game, will, or at least should, vary quite a bit. And you can break this down even further by scale. Again, the amount of command and control that will occur in a squad level game, like ASL, will vary and differ from that of an operational level game, like, say, the OCS series. And it has to. Then you have variations based on solitaire and face to face or group play. So not only do we have a general command and control argument, an ongoing one that has existed seemingly forever, but from this general argument comes numerous splinters of other arguments that focus on particulars that revolve around that. So, like the author of the article I referenced earlier, I too have not played every rule system, and so I can't comment on all of them. But I can comment on a few and relate them to you by way of example and demonstration. And additionally, we would do well to bear in mind that the ongoing evolution of wargaming is just that. It's ongoing. It isn't what it was, and it's not what it's going to be, and it never will be what it's going to be by the very nature that is changing. So, and I think that's a good thing. Otherwise, it would stagnate and rot. So, just look at any typical SPI game from the 70s and hold it against almost anything that's contemporary, and it's like day and night. Um, but just as much as it's like day and night, also there's some things that have carried over and lingered on. So that's interesting as well. In general, there are a number of templates in use when it comes to command and control in war games, and among these are the command point system, I guess you could call it for lack of a better term, which resembles your Euro game type stuff. Uh, you manage resources, sacrificing here to bolster there, etc. It's a kind of freedom through limitation affair that offers you a ton of choices while allowing a kind of omni control slash, like I said, limitation. So, kind of a Euro flavor. Another mechanic, I guess, that has grown into its own to such an extent that I truly believe this, that a number of game designs incorporate this method simply because it's what's hot right now and it sells games. I think a lot of people out there, they look for certain things and they look for cards in games for whatever reason. I guess they like it and they buy it. So designers, developers, publishers even, they're in tune to what people want, and the card stuff is hot. So, a lot of these games are throwing cards in, not because they need it or because it fleshes the game out, but because they think it's going to make the game sell. And that's the wrong reason to do it, but that's another subject. And I'm not talking about just drawing a card or two to add flavor to your tactical maneuvers or anything like that. I'm talking about managing an entire hand of cards, and with this hand of cards, commanding your units through this hand. That is to say, you can't move or engage in combat otherwise except through a hand of cards. And I guess, another oft-used mechanic is the command radius. That's pretty standard. You see this in a ton of stuff, whether you have card-driven games or not. You're going to have typically something in there, a leader, say, with a specific command radius, and everything within that radius gets activated. That's standard. That's been going on forever. So there's that. I think the important thing would be to actually, regarding command and control, and what is realistic, what's not, what should be taken out, what should be left in. There's no real way to know and or deal with this stuff, or no better way to know and or deal with it than, unless you actually served in war or the military, read up on it, and you get a better grasp of the particular era's ways of dealing with this, and a better understanding of the difficulty of applying this to a cardboard simulation. And regarding this, I'd highly recommend Martin van Creveld's book, Command in War. And his last name is Creveld, Creveld. The book, of course, Command in War. And as you might hear, Manchild in the background expressing his discontent with something. Manchild being, in case you missed it in one of the episodes, one of our neighbors' baby slash kids who looks like a grown man in the body of a baby. They're not even supposed to have kids here in this particular graduate school dorm like apartment area, but nevertheless, Manchild has managed to infiltrate the premises and often lets his presence be known. So you may hear him in the background. Apologize for that. So yeah, Creveld's book. Give that a read if you're interested in the subject matter and want more a healthier portion served up. But this book is the first book to deal exclusively with the nature of command itself. You've got a ton of books out there that deal with specific commanders and their style or method of command, but this thing focuses specifically on command itself, and it traces its development over 2,000 years from way back from ancient Greece to the Vietnam era. So it treats historically the whole variety of problems involved in commanding armies, with inclusion of staff organization and administration, communications, methods and technologies, weaponry, logistics, all that stuff. It analyzes the relationship between these problems and overall military strategy, and it's pretty interesting stuff. And even if you're not interested in the military, it's an interesting subject. So if you look at a few games, you'll quickly get a feel for how this command and control issue gets resolved. Each game has its own way of dealing with it. I'll run through a few here and then probably call it a night. But the first game I think I'll mention is also the first modern board war game, or is hailed as such. That's Tactics. Came out a long time ago, I think before my time, if it came out before 73. Can't remember if it did or not. Anyway, I was too young to appreciate this thing, and I think I'm too old to appreciate it, as I have been exposed to far too many greater and better things. But this game had what is called a basic turn allowance, and this would allow each side 30 points to spread out and assign to units of his or her choice as he or she saw fit. Now, obviously, you could conceivably assign one single unit the entire basic turn allowance, whilst leaving everybody high and dry. But I guess the basic premise here was a way of demonstrating how you can't do everything you necessarily want to do, as you only have so many points to work with. And I've messed with this myself in some game designs. I like the idea to an extent, and as far as preventing one unit from receiving the whole plate of points. That's easily fixed with, say, a certain limitation as to how many points a single unit can receive, but that's neither here nor there. Then you have written orders, and this has been going on for as long as people have probably been playing, most specifically Napoleonic and Civil War era games. This, of course, is indigenous to those, but quite literally, players would write out orders for the next turn. So if you have a unit or a section or a formation that wishes to do something, you will have to scratch that out on a post-it note, and when the appropriate time comes, carry out that order. Now, the problem, of course, is successfully and timely sending and receiving these orders. There's a certain knack to it as well as luck. The rules system that immediately comes to mind regarding this, right off the top of my head, other than the myriad of miniatures rules out there, and there are a lot, the gamers stuff. When I say the gamers, the ones that did OCS, Standard Combat Series, the Napoleonic stuff, they also have a Civil War branch of games. In general, the command system for that works as follows, and this is pulled from the Napoleonic stuff they did. You have an army commander who uses his command points to generate orders, and the player, of course, writes these on scratch paper and records them on the order log. So the orders take time to arrive at the receiving corps headquarters, and of course, upon arrival, the player checks for their acceptance. There's no guarantee just because you send an order that it's going to get there when you want it to or at all. And then you also have to take into account the fact that a received order is going to be not necessarily be carried out. You have tons of commanders who didn't like other commanders, or for whatever reason felt the order was inappropriate or what have you, and it wouldn't carry them out or would do something completely different. The orders could be delayed, distorted, or accepted. Of course, once accepted, they must be acted on in good faith, even if game conditions change. So, what might seem appropriate at one point in the game, that could no longer seem appropriate, but once the order is received, it's carried out, whether appropriate or not, which makes for a very interesting and fun game. What is more, the written orders concept even carries over into the gamer's tactical combat series as well, which is on the surface may be odd because this is primarily World War II era type stuff, and to have to deal with written orders is fairly alien to me. But they deal with it, and a lot of people seem to like it. Then you have Columbia Games East Front, and I use this by way of example. It's by no means the only game to deal with command and control in this manner. I just chose this as an example. It's an operational treatment of the Barbarossa campaign. It deals with command through headquarters, and it's with your headquarters that you mobilize and support your units. Each one has a command strength that is lost as command is executed, and each headquarters has a command range, and this is nothing new by any means, but it works, and that's why it's used. So only units within range of their headquarters can activate, and additionally, each side has a supreme headquarters, which can activate units anywhere on the map. And it's all fine and dandy, but this has been up to level, and you have games like a Victory Lost with its chit pull mechanism. With East Front, you can decide who and when, who activates and when, but with games like Victory Lost and their chit pull mechanic, it randomizes it more so that you may not be able to activate a particular headquarters when you want to, which can be actually very costly depending on specific game situations. But I like the chit pull mechanic better. It limits command, and I don't think that's a bad thing. The command's still there. It is just limited. There's no such thing as a godlike general or commander lording over the battlefield. That is a mythological, romantic perception, and is a fallacy. It isn't realistic. For those of you that don't care about realism, I guess it's not a problem. And again, the argument of realism within games can only be taken so far, but it can be taken and should be taken to a certain level. And I think the chit pull mechanic, by way of activating units, is a brilliant way of dealing with and limiting commands. So, through a different scale, you have Combat Commander, which also has a different approach to the whole command and control system. And I bring this game up because so many people seem to be just so fond and adoring of it. I get it. It's a fun game and all, but I'm not doing backflips uh, because of it like a lot of people are. It's not the end all be all, in my opinion. Now, this game is cherished by a ton of people. I don't think they realize perhaps why they may like it, and I think a lot of it has to do with the way command and control is handled within the game. If people didn't like the way this was handled, I can't imagine they would enjoy the game. But here you have cards that rule the day. You get a hand to manage from a 72 card deck, and you can't do anything without playing a card. The size of your hand depends on if you're attacking, performing recon, or defending. Additionally, you have leaders with a command radius, and this mechanic obviously lends itself well to the operational and squad level. Leaders also add their command number to the firepower, movement, range, and morale to same hex units. And interestingly, there's a command confusion card that acts as a dud in your hand. So basically, what you have here is a more limited command and control via the cards. Otherwise, you pretty much have a full-blown ASL ripoff on your hands. And that's kind of like ASL, in a kind of roundabout way, has harmed as much as helped the wargame industry, because for people, a ton of people that is, that enjoy ASL, they're not going to play anything else, because 9 times out of 10, anything else is a watered down version of ASL. And it's kind of like the Lord of the Rings syndrome. I read those books, oh man, when I was in high school. All three of them, is about as fast as I could read. I loved them and enjoyed them so much, but there's only the three books. And you want to read something else, fantasy wise, in that genre, there's other stuff out there. This whole Sword of Shannara series, or even the Wheel of Time series by Robert Jordan. You read that stuff, and having read The Lord of the Rings, you can't help but feel like you've been here before. You've read this stuff before. Why the hell am I reading it again? Sure, it's variated, it's a little different, but at the same time, it's the same stuff. So I think one of the few things that has successfully um, reopened the fantasy genre into new pathways is the Game of Thrones books, as it analyzes and deals with subjects that are typically taken for granted or glossed over. I think if you watch the last episode, an interesting point was brought up in that how many books paint an illustration of, say, for instance, crucified enemies lining a road. Well, in the Game of Thrones, they don't just paint that image; they deal with the ramifications of that image by way of politics and the people that live there, etc. It's interesting stuff. It's not just armies fighting armies and glory on the battlefield. It's a lot of the gears and levers that cause a kingdom to function, if I can put it any better. That's what it's about, and it's great stuff. So, moving along, Combat Commander, as I've stated, which also reminds me of Command and Colors, not just because of the name, but similar system, and not to be redundant, but you have your card-driven mechanic. Units move based on cards, and you have the board, which is divided into three sections: a left wing, a center, and right wing, which again lends itself to hockey terminology. But you have cards that you pull, and they allow you to maneuver certain units within a certain area or multiple areas. And but the sad thing about this game, as much as I have played and enjoyed it, is there are leaders in this game, but they pretty much fade into the background, literally, and they're barely noticeable. And it's a real shame. Here you got leaders doing nothing more than occasionally preventing a unit it is adjacent to from retreating more than it otherwise would. Um, they play a minor supportive role in attacks. So truly, this is an era and a game that demands a great deal of attention to command and control, and you'd think more attention will be given to the subject, as half its name is command. But it didn't happen that way, and the odd thing is the game is damn successful. Again, another game that people love and cherish. I enjoyed it. I don't hold it above my head as a testament to war game design, but it's an enjoyable game, and I think this stuff was intentionally left out. I don't think it was overlooked. It was intentionally left out because it is I don't know, maybe you could call it the pinball of games. Um, there's only so much that you can do, and a lot is left up to the way the game is built. So, but it's fun stuff. Then you have a game that I've talked about at length. I'm sorry to go into it again. I'll be brief, but it bears mentioning just because of again, it's a fascinating and I think brilliant take on the command and control system within war games. And you got a little bit of everything here. Fighting formations by the same guy who gave us Combat Commander, and don't let that fool you because they're two very different games if you're unfamiliar with either or both of them. Fighting formations is what a World War II squad level game would look like through a Euro game lens. It's all here: resource management, cards. To be honest, my initial thoughts on this thing, uh, other than brief confusion, was that this thing was brilliant, and I still think that it is. Unfortunately, I think for a lot of people who got this thing, and I'm not sure if it was in lost in their through their expectation or what, but I guess it was too much of a good thing, and they're just left scratching their heads. Um, but I'll go into it just briefly by way of example. So you got the cards, of course, but you also have a couple other interesting things going on here. One is the order matrix, which determines which orders are available to the players at any given moment via the position of allotted order cubes within colored boxes. Additionally, this coincides with initiative, and as orders are executed, the initiative moves in the opposite player's favor. So on map, you place any number of your available command markers, which exert a command radius. Old faithful, huh? Additionally, if you get this game, you'll quickly notice something is in fact missing, although it's accounted for quite well. Leader counters. You don't have any leader counters in this game. So you have a number of good things going on here, and to say it's fiddly, well, you'd be right. But for me, I thought it was a good kind of fiddly. Maybe there's a good and a bad fiddly. I think in general, people consider anything fiddly to be bad. They don't want to mess with it. It's unnecessary. But I think this is good stuff. So, though awkward at first, once you get the hang of it, if you're patient enough, the system really shines. Another interesting aspect of command and control within games, and specifically ASL, is ASL's built-in a negative aspect regarding command, and by way of negative, I mean they have commanders in this game that are detrimental, to say the least, to anything you might be trying to do. And why not? Not all leaders were great men who made fantastic decisions. A lot of guys made hasty mistakes or didn't act at all, and this stuff gets reflected in leaders within the game, in which leaders have a positive rating, and typically a negative rating. The higher your negative rating, the better. But some of these guys in this game have a +1 or higher, and it adversely affects and hinders anything your squad tries to do, and it's pretty interesting to have to deal with. And on and on, and this, you can look at tons and tons of games. As many variations there are on the theme, you will also recognize recurring motifs regarding uh, command and control. It is something that has evolved and will continue to evolve as we play our games. It would be interesting to project into the not distant future just what command and control might look like. I don't know how much more you could change it, uh, but it would be interesting to see. I mean, who would have thought of the whole chit pull thing? It seems obvious enough now, but the stuff wasn't really incorporated into the majority of games for some time until relatively recently in wargaming history. So there's that, as I tend to say. And, in retrospect, this episode, I'm not sure what happened. It was supposed to be a blowout 25th anniversary type thing. It's more of like the few people that are left after the bar closes type thing, which can be good in its own right. But for those of you that were expecting, like I say, the blowout episode that I might have mistakenly led you to believe it would be, I apologize all over the place. But in closing, I'd like to do something I haven't done in a long time. I've only done it once. And I apologize ahead of time because I just know I'm going to butcher a ton of these names. But as I've gained a number of subscribers, 145 to be exact, and gee gosh golly, I thank each and every one of you. I'd do so personally if I could. Um, but the next best thing I can do is name drop you guys and give a general thanks to all of you. So, in ending, I'll start with Paco Garcia, Kevin Flynn, Sergeant Steiner, Derek M., Peter Perla, C.P. Cunningham, Robert Hill, Ismay 1999, Versival, Jean Dietrich, Uwe Eichert, Mikkel Birkegaard, Jesse Escobedo, my good man, Anthony Salvaggio, apparently has been listening to me since the very first episode. Bless your heart. Ralt61, Kevin Smith, Ian Martin, Gin CA, Adam Crafty, 67, Chuck Davis, Lang Jones, Dan Cunningham, Stuart Nairn, Zarx 81, Stonewall 77, Kent Ruber, Grand Canyon 84, Patriotic Gestalt, VT View from the Turret, Ed Jr., Billiard Friend, BC Park ER Jr., Nathan Scott, Mr. Joe 6778, Phil Ironic, Gary Van Sant, Jason Crawford, Gary Armstrong, CJ Capta, Keith Scholes, not done yet, Dave Crater, Tony ZipTube, Super Ali Blabla, Gaetano Russo, Richard Simmons, Joshua Gottesman, Michael Pavick, P. Backus, Carl Way, Zoda, Terry McHugh, Per Sirden, John Nellis, Bob Mosdall, Shane Brewer, Mark DeCiccio, Nick Aftages, Ed Benila, Gerald Creek, Jim Brown, A.W. Doherty, Tinker Shuffle, Dave Edwards, 11 Pancho 11, Guillermo Regalo, Andreas Lunden, Charles Cab, Jens Blixt, Shannon Keys, Itinerant Hobbyist, Stephen Whitesell, Michael Sundberg, Ash Dam, Grief Junkie, Snorri HT, Ian Woodcare, Jason Young, Rev Midney, Foo Dog 74, Douglas Riley, Samir Abdin, Jay Doyle, Neil Kegley, Fushigi TV, Todd Nelson, Cole Beal, Cats 272's channel, Brad Cozy, Sven Folkeson, Cthulhu the Old, Rex Gator, Rob Scriven, Barto Wing, Toimo Sivanpera, Transplatin, Eris Ben Aharon, M. Inar, Pedro Juan Ferrer, Matosis, Stuka Joe, Jean Mag, my hockey friend, and finally, Joshua Schutte. Truly, thank you one, thank you all for carrying me through 25 episodes. Honestly, it is because of you guys that I have done this, that I keep doing this, that I will continue to do this. Again, I don't know how long I will be doing this. I think I got a few more episodes left in me to be sure. But really, thanks everyone for your support. It is greatly appreciated. And as far as future episodes go, I got a couple tricks up my sleeve. I have one thing in particular that I will be working on fairly soon and have it up for you most likely by next week. Of course, everything is subject to the change as well as wherever my whim and fancy lands me at a particular moment. Uh, that being said, I'll have something for you. And of course, don't forget there is a way for you to give feedback at the bottom of these shows. Type something in, and the thumbs are there as well for you to use. Give me a thumb up, give me a thumb down. Uh, Let me know how I'm doing. It's good to hear from you guys, honestly. So, with that said, thanks for listening and keep gaming.